It's been over 15 years since the release of The Matrix, and even though there's been a lot of philosophical analysis and insight made about the film and its sequels, there's something I don't hear brought up an awful lot. Something interesting I noticed more and more as I watched the film as a kid were certain details about the character Cypher, who, if you've watched the film, you'll know is the crew member of the Nebuchadnezzar, who betrays the other crew in order to be reinserted into the Matrix. Now, this won't be a life-changing perspective on the film, and it's very likely these observations have been made before, and this is somewhere out there already being said, but it's something I don't hear that often, and this is just my thoughts on the character Cypher in The Matrix, and why he does what he does in the film. Even though Cypher dies in the film a little over halfway into its runtime, he is a very present character up to that point. Certainly more so than characters like Switch or APOC, and probably more than the other members of the crew. In fact, the actor Joe Pantoliano, who plays Cypher, appeared in one of the more popular posters of the film, along with the movie's three main characters Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus, played by Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Lawrence Fishburne, so I think it's safe to say he's a supporting character. Also, he's the first character you hear speak in the beginning of the film. The start is a conversation between Cypher and Trinity as they talk about their pursuit of Neo, who is believed to be the One, the savior to free humankind from the Matrix.
Yeah.
Is everything in place?
You weren't supposed to relieve me.
I know, but I felt like taking a shift.
You like him, don't you? You like watching him.
Don't be ridiculous.
We're gonna kill him. You understand that?
Morpheus believes he is the one.
Right away, you can pick up on Cypher's perhaps sleazy nature as he teases Trinity's romantic interest in Neo, as well as his casual cynicism for the mission, something he mentions to Neo later when he is freed. Throughout the film, he plays the part of a comic relief until he's revealed to be the mustache-twirling villain in cahoots with the agents, with, oddly enough, a mustache to match.
Yeah, I think it was your sinister mustache.
Fuck you.
There's an obvious subtext that he's jealous of Trinity's feelings for Neo before he confesses his own feelings for her while eerily crawling over her body. There's even a reference to him supposedly observing women while hacking into the Matrix, further showing his sexual interests, something he possibly doesn't get to pursue while on the Nebuchadnezzar.
All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead.
And on top of that, there's a certain sense of decadence implied about Cypher when we see him first revealed to be talking to Agent Smith, as they sit in a fancy restaurant and he talks about wanting to be reprogrammed into the Matrix as a rich celebrity. All these reasons could be enough to explain why he would betray his crew for his own shallow personal interests, showing that he simply did it for a better quality of life, even if that life is a lie. And his arc in the film isn't the main focus of the story, and his actions are mainly a catalyst for the plot, so anything beyond that probably doesn't really matter. But that said, there were always things I noticed that I think give more sympathetic reasons for why he did what he did that make him just a little bit more than a mustache-twirling villain. First of all, like I said, he provides a bit of comic relief early in the film.
It means buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Something that a lot of the other crew members do. They're actually often quite quiet and a bit stiff, including Trinity and Morpheus. In contrast, this makes Cypher seem a little laid back and perhaps not serious about everything, but at times he seems more human than the rest of the crew.
And Cypher.
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene about an hour into the film when Neo comes across Cypher sitting at the computer and the two of them talk. This is right before we find out that Cypher is a traitor. In fact, at the very beginning of the scene, Cypher is alarmed at Neo's presence, but calms down when he notices there's no one else around. Right away, he turns off all monitors not showing code, which it's revealed Neo can't yet read, so it's most likely that at that moment he was gearing up to enter the Matrix and talk to Smith while everyone was asleep. As the two talk, Cypher shares a drink with Neo and admits he regrets not taking the blue pill, which would have left him in the Matrix unaware of its existence, seemingly sort of joking.
I know what you're thinking. Because right now I'm thinking the same thing. Actually, I've been thinking it ever since I got here. Why, oh why, didn't I take the blue pill?
When he says this, there's a really nice subtle reaction that Neo gives. At first he laughs, but then he pauses. It's like he appreciates that someone finally said it to him, that for all the noble reasons to rebel against the machines, it's a relief to just admit how difficult it is and joke about it. The scene then gets a little more serious, as Cypher shows his cynicism of Neo being the One.
So you're here to save the world. What do you say to something like that?
And advises he should just run whenever he sees an agent, leading us into the next scene and setting the tone of Cypher's interest for survival and showing his deal with Smith. A nice contrast after the setting of the decadent restaurant is the dinner scene right afterwards, as the crew sarcastically comment on the gruel-like substance that they have to eat.
If you close your eyes, it almost feels like you're eating runny eggs.
You know, a bowl of snot.
During that scene, the character Mouse talks first about what food tasted like back when he was in the Matrix, but then moves on to talk about the woman in the red dress, a program of a beautiful woman he designed in the Construct, the sort of sandbox program they use outside of the Matrix. He enthusiastically offers to allow Neo to meet with her personally in the Construct, implying a sexual encounter as Switch refers to Mouse as a digital pimp.
But if you'd like to meet her, I can arrange a much more personalized meal.
The digital pimp hard at work.
The conversation is soon interrupted, however, as Morpheus enters and the crew enter the Matrix, and Cypher's plan comes into play, leading to the death of many of the crew, and Cypher's death himself. So, just looking back over all these moments beforehand, what if Cypher's motive was a little more complicated than a mere shallow interest in himself? What if maybe he did it because he kind of just didn't get along with any of the crew? Spending all that time living in danger and cooped up in a cold post-apocalyptic hovercraft has got to be tough, but if you were to do it with no affectionate companionship, it would just make you want to cop out, as cabin fever would inevitably kick in. Before I noted that there are scenes where Cypher gives off a bit of a creepy vibe and does things that seem somewhat uncomfortably perverse, and that perhaps his sexual interests aren't met. But then, as we saw, Mouse is a character who is far more comfortable with expressing his sexual interests and even offers to share his methods of fantasy. In a way, he's kind of offering to share his futuristic blow-up doll with Neo, as we know he has a sexual interest in the woman in the red dress himself. And sure, he gets told to shut up at the dinner table, but there's a sort of sibling-like familiarity in the way Switch and APOC tease Mouse.
So I understand that you've run through the agent training program. You know, I wrote that program.
Here it comes.
Meanwhile, Cypher doesn't even sit at the table. Also, that moment in which Cypher talks about looking at blondes, brunettes, and redheads is most likely a lie, as whatever he was monitoring is probably to do with arranging his meeting with Smith. A lot of Cypher's interactions are with Trinity, and I think a certain kinship between the two is implied. As Cypher mentions, he's been out of the Matrix for 9 years.
After 9 years, you know what I realize?
And perhaps in that time he and Trinity had possibly become close, as they do have something of a comfortable shorthand in conversation. But Trinity often behaves coldly around him. Maybe they were close, and maybe in their past he expressed his feelings for her or made an advance that changed things. But that might just be me reading far too much into it. But there is a coldness that Cypher is trying to break, which you can see in this scene, for example, when Cypher catches Trinity leaving Neo some food, shortly after Neo has had his first training session.
I don't remember you ever bringing me dinner. There is something about him, isn't there?
Don't tell me you're a believer now.
I just keep wondering if Morpheus is so sure. Why doesn't he take him to see the Oracle?
Morpheus will take him when he's ready.
In fact, the more I think about it, the way he emphasizes the word me
I don't remember you ever bringing me dinner.
could be an indicator that they were once an item at some point, but then drifted apart. Although, it's far more likely a reference to when Cypher was first removed from the Matrix and being trained, which would imply that he was freed after Trinity was, which implies also that Trinity and Morpheus would have a longer-standing bond than Cypher would have with Trinity, as Morpheus was seemingly freed very early on in the Resistance.
She's been with us since the beginning.
The beginning?
Of the Resistance.
On that subject, it's interesting to note how little Cypher and Morpheus interact. Morpheus is very open and honest with his crew, especially Trinity and Neo, and is even described by Tank as a father figure.
Morpheus, you're more than a leader to us. You're a father.
Cypher later expresses his disdain and frustrations with Morpheus to Trinity.
I'm tired of that jagoff and all of his bullshit.
Again, this could be reading into it too much, but what if something happened between Cypher and Morpheus? Maybe they had an argument that was never resolved, and since the rest of the crew hold Morpheus in such a high regard, the blowout left Cypher in an awkward place on the Nebuchadnezzar, maybe from defying Morpheus' authority, or just getting on Morpheus' nerve with his laid-back sense of humor.
Gonna pop.
Breathe. And Cypher.
But like I said, that might be looking into it too much. It's possible that Cypher simply got sick of hanging around the same people for 9 years, especially if he didn't get along with them. It seems his demeanour throughout the film is off-putting to people, and his means of joking and being laid back about his situation might have been distracting or frustrating to the more focused members of the crew on the Nebuchadnezzar, even though it probably was just his way of coping with being removed from the Matrix, the process of which does seem like a pretty traumatic experience. As Morpheus states, the older a person is when removed from the Matrix, the harder it is for them to let go.
We have a rule. We never free a mind once it's reached a certain age. It's dangerous. The mind has trouble letting go. I've seen it before, and I'm sorry.
Going on the ages of the actors alone, you could assume that Cypher is older than Neo, and therefore has struggled more with his removal, and like I said, copes by approaching the situation with a cynical sense of humour. The character Tank is an equally humorous character, but he's very upbeat, and doesn't have the dry cynicism that Cypher has, and also wasn't born inside the Matrix.
You don't have any holes?
Nope. Me and my brother Dozer were both 100% pure old-fashioned, homegrown human, born free right here, in the real world.
And therefore wouldn't know the true horror of being torn from it. Another reason Cypher gives for wanting to leave is that he's sick of the food on the ship.
I'm tired of this war. Tired of fighting. I'm tired of this ship. Being cold, of eating the same goddamn goop every day.
But as you can see, everyone has their complaints about it, and Neo shows no enthusiasm when introduced to the substance himself. Oddly enough, the only two who show any appreciation are Tank and Dozer.
Here you go, buddy. Breakfast of champions.
It's a single-celled protein combined with synthetic aminos, vitamins, and minerals. Everything the body needs.
The only two to not have experienced anything superior tasting, having never been in the Matrix themselves. But back to Cypher's complaints. Perhaps his disdain for the food is actually his disdain for the experience of having to share a meal with the same people every day, feeling more and more alienated by them. As I noted before, he doesn't even sit at the table with them.
Screw this, fighting Neo.
But he states it's the conditions of the food and the cold that have driven him to want to return to living in the Matrix. So he's possibly unaware that his motives come from a feeling of alienation. Perhaps that same feeling of alienation is what initially drove him to pursue Morpheus and leave the Matrix in the first place, similar to Neo, who in the beginning of the film we see to be kind of a shut-in, reluctant to be social, and also doesn't get along in his day job. So, given all these reasons as to why Cypher might feel alienated on the Nebuchadnezzar, it would seem he tried to fill a void by having his life rewritten, interested in better tasting food and drink, and believing the companionship in being a rich celebrity would be better. This also implies how dissatisfactory his life probably was inside the Matrix before being removed, as he doesn't just want to be back inside the Matrix, but wants his life to be better inside it too. Note how he doesn't even care what kind of celebrity he would be. He just wants to feel important.
And I want to be rich. You know, someone important. Like an actor.
What's also interesting is how compliant Smith is with his demands, regardless of how vague some of them are. Contrasting with Morpheus, who Cypher possibly feels isn't listening to him, Smith tells Cypher everything he wants to hear.
All I do is what he tells me to do.
Whatever you want, Mr. Reagan.
It's also highly probable that Smith had no intention of reinserting Cypher into the Matrix, as he makes no reference to the fact after Cypher is killed. Unless I'm mistaken, Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, and Tank never say his name afterwards either. So, it would appear Cypher was taken advantage of by the machines through his weakness, which was a desire for a better life and companionship, and these motives, I think, make the character Cypher more human and sympathetic.
Somebody up there still likes me.
And it's kind of brilliant that the machines exploited the crew by going after the most humanly vulnerable of the group, an emotional weakness that they would consider something that makes humans intrinsically inferior.
Only human.
Now, don't get me wrong, while I think there's a more sympathetic motive behind Cypher's actions, it doesn't redeem him, considering he causes the death of most of his crew, personally murdering most of them himself in cold blood.
Too late.
And there are some bits where he is just plain creepy. In the end, though, I think it is interesting how there is a subtle, consistent subtext of Cypher's distance with the rest of the crew, and ultimately I think it's simply a testament to the level of detail of the film, and how well written a lot of it is, when I do consider The Matrix to be a really well-made blockbuster action movie. Perhaps these were details developed by the Wachowskis, or was something suggested by the actor Joe Pantoliano himself. Either way, it's interesting to see how a bad guy character in an action movie can have a little more dimension towards his wrongdoing, and doesn't necessarily have to be a straight-up mustache-twirling villain, especially when you consider a character like, say, Luther in The Warriors, who's simply an agent of chaos.
Why'd you waste Cyrus?
No reason. I just like doing things like that.
Or Walter Peck in Ghostbusters, who, as time has gone by, has actually been considered technically right about what he did.
This man has no dick.
But let me know what you think in the comments section,
It doesn't mean anything.
and what you think of this video overall. This is my first time doing this kind of video, and I'd like to do more, so I'm interested in any intelligent feedback. Thanks for watching.